seeking solutions in Sochi. Presidents Putin and Erdogan meet face-to-face for the first time in 18 months. How closely was Washington watching? And were any differences resolved over Syria? I'm Andrei Fedorov, and today's newsmaker is the Russia-Turkey summit in Sochi. Turkey and the United States are vital NATO allies, but right now their relationship is strained at best. On the sidelines of this year's UN General Assembly, President Erdogan said he had far more fruitful relationships with President Joe Biden's predecessors and warned the course of Turkey-US relations does not bode well. But as Ankara's relationship with Washington becomes more challenged, could Turkey's ties with Russia become stronger? Well, that was the hope in Sochi as Presidents Putin and Erdogan met to discuss Syria, among a number of other strategic issues. The two leaders are on opposing sides of that conflict. Ankara supports the opposition trying to oust Bashar al-Assad, while Moscow has worked to keep him in power. But despite the differences, both leaders have found ways to compromise.
Negotiations are sometimes difficult, but with a positive final result. Our departments have learned to find compromises beneficial for both sides.
The steps we have taken with Russia related to Syria are of utmost importance. The peace there depends on Turkey-Russia relations.
While the summit seems to have fostered some form of cooperation, the situation in opposition-held Idlib remains tense. Despite agreeing to a ceasefire with Turkey last year, Russia is reported to have stepped up airstrikes in the northwestern province, which is home to some 3 million Syrians, most displaced from other parts of the country. Ankara warned Moscow its attacks from above were killing civilians, but both presidents declared the meeting productive and useful. Here's what President Erdogan had to say upon his return from Russia.
The Syrian crisis, which has been going on for many years, has cost the entire region, especially our country. In addition to the humanitarian crises, the economic burden has reached unbearable proportions for all of us. Turkey remains committed to every issue we agreed with Russia about Syria. There is no going back. We continue to comply with all agreements and continue our efforts to clear radical elements from the security corridor. We will not compromise on that. But we expect the same from our counterparts. The S-400 deal continues. There is no such thing as taking a step back. During our fruitful meeting, we spoke about this in detail and discussed how to take the deal to the next level, including the construction of aircraft engines and the steps we will take regarding warplanes.
Well, the meeting appears to show Turkey is keen to cooperate with the Kremlin, especially in light of President Erdogan's strained relationship with Washington. But have Ankara and Moscow resolved their differences over Syria? Joining me now to discuss that from Ankara is Murat Aslan. He's held several high-level positions within the Turkish armed forces, and he's now a researcher at the SETA Foundation. From Moscow, Andrei Fedorov is Russia's former deputy foreign minister and a member of President Putin's advisory team. And completing our panel is Samuel Ramani, who teaches at Oxford University. He's also an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Thanks all so much for being with us. So Syria was, of course, a priority at this meeting, but still, we have to say there are so many issues of fundamental importance, really, at play in these negotiations. There are massive defense deals, energy deals, NATO, Libya, even peacekeeping in Nagorno-Karabakh. So a lot to factor in, but let's begin with Syria. It seems the best we're hearing is that they've agreed to preserve the status quo in Idlib. Andrei, how sustainable is the status quo when there have been ceasefire violations through Russian airstrikes, and moreover, the status quo obviously doesn't resolve the underlying problems?
I think it's quite important because during the last couple of months, there was quite a strong pressure from President Assad to clean up Idlib and, as he said, to restore full control over the Syrian territory. And it's not a big secret now that Syrian army was ready to start quite a broad offensive operation in Idlib, but for such kind of operation there was a high need of Russian support from the air. I think that this temporary solution which was reached now is quite a good one, because it will help us to avoid a lot of problems, a lot of unwanted situations, and it prevents a new crisis in relationship between Russia and Turkey.
Right, Andrei. I mean, you did find the tone of the meeting quite encouraging. Expand on that. Why? What stood out to you that seemed progress in some sense?
First of all, it was a very friendly meeting, and it's very important for both sides. It was not one-sided meeting. And the key understanding during this meeting was that Syrian problem, as well as some other problems, by the way, including Karabakh and Libya, cannot be solved without active Turkish participation. So from this point of view, Russia is obliged for such kind of cooperation. But I think that personal relationship between Putin and Erdogan also are helping to find proper answers at this stage. But still, a lot of problems are remaining.
Okay. Murat, I want to get your perspective on that, if you feel that the overall the tone was positive. Maybe not a whole lot was resolved on paper, but still, this is good. It's a stronger relationship moving forward.
Well, I don't see it as a positive development, because the sense of interpreting the events were positive, though. Now, they have a type of flexibility in identifying what they could do in future, mainly in Syria. Because depending on the external developments, like the meeting of Biden and Erdogan, now Russia has a luxury either to escalate or de-escalate, depending on what outcomes to be achieved by both leaders in Rome or Glasgow. On the other hand, as Andrei underlined, Assad is keen to clean up Idlib, though. The question in here is still a type of ambiguity, because cleaning up whom? Radical organizations or the people living inside Idlib? The aim of Assad is to push populations towards Turkey. That means Turkey is really vigilant in preventing another humanitarian disaster. So there's a type of balance, in perceiving, interpreting, and also implementing what will happen in Syria.
Right. So, Samuel, Russia and Turkey have as much common interest, for mutually beneficial cooperation as they do conflicting interests. So compromise is obviously key. How good are Russia and Turkey at compromising?
So it appears as if Russia and Turkey have had a lot of core disagreements on a wide range of issues, from Syria to Libya to Nagorno-Karabakh over the past several years. But particularly as a result of the summits between Putin and Erdogan, they've been quite good at constraining and managing and mitigating those confrontations. And that's what we've seen unfold at the Sochi summit. For example, over Idlib, there's been a long-standing clash between Russia's desire to have Assad maintain complete control over Syria and Turkey's and their alleged claim that Turkey is not doing enough to deal with Tayyip al-Sham. Turkey does not want Assad to do that because it fears a refugee crisis. But both sides have been able to largely avoid a major conflict. The exception, of course, being Operation Spring Shield in February and March of last year, which was caused by the death of Turkish military personnel. So aside from isolated instances of conflict, they've been pretty good at preventing an all-out Turkey-Syria war or Russia-Turkey conflict. Similarly, in Libya, the Wagner Group, the Russian PMC, and Turkey have had clashes over the past 18 months, but now they've managed to agree to some degree of stasis there, as they managed to agree to a ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh. So I think that they're quite good at making compromises to avoid the highest level of escalation, but they're finding it much more difficult to make compromises on sustainable peace negotiations and on eliminating core disagreements that lie below that threshold.
Interesting. Samuel, since you branched out there, I want to ask you in a little more detail about what Russian interests might be in this meeting and, of course, going forward. To what extent does Russia see an alliance with Turkey and strengthening that relationship as an opportunity to weaken the NATO alliance? And is it such an opportunity?
Well, certainly Russia has been greeted any opportunity to forge closer ties with NATO members. And we're seeing that's not just something that's being confined to Turkey. They're also maintaining closer relations with Greece, closer relations with Hungary, basically any NATO country that would give them an opportunity to engage with them on a kind of commercial level or more radically on a security level. Russia has welcomed that opportunity. But I think that they're cognizant of the fact that Turkey is not going to leave NATO or join any kind of non-Western security architecture. So there's obviously a limit over there. I think that Russia's interests really were several at this summit. First, establishing deconfliction with Turkey over Syria, preventing a repeat of Operation Spring Shield. Second, establishing deconfliction in Libya and preventing a major conflict, particularly if the elections in December 2021 don't happen. Third, maintaining a ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh and preventing new escalations between Turkey and Russia in the post-Soviet space. So Ukraine was skirted as an issue. Central Asia and Afghanistan are also theaters of rivalry that need to be mitigated. And fourth was the pursuit of new economic opportunities, particularly in the nuclear energy sphere.
Let me ask Murat, how conscious is Turkey of Russia potentially celebrating any challenges to NATO and using that as kind of a goal or an ambition, at the very least, in negotiations with Russia or with Turkey?
Okay, I will go back to the previous question first, because Turkey does not want any alliance with Russia, but just a cooperation, a strategic cooperation maybe. Because Russia and Turkey are cooperating and confronting in the meantime. What does that mean? Turkey fight with the Russians on the ground, for instance, in Syria or in Libya. Well, they also negotiate at the political level. So it's a new type of maybe international politics. On the other hand, Turkish perception on Russia is manifold. The first one is to balance the United States. That's correct. Second thing, manage the developments in the Middle East and in the close vicinity of Turkey. Because Russia has become the reality on the ground that you can't ignore Russia's presence, because Russian strategy for the last decade has become containment of NATO, with a similarity to American strategy during the Cold War for the Soviet Union. What does that mean? Russia wants a type of gap at the southeastern flank of NATO, and Turkey presents the best opportunity for them, and they press it. On the other hand, Turkey is aware of this strategy and just try to manage the developments, but very focused on NATO alliance, because Turkey is really happy with the NATO's guarantees and does not want a shift of access. I think we should divert the strategy of Turkey in terms of Russia's approach to Turkey and Turkey's approach to Russia.
Interesting. Andrei, as far as what Murat was describing as the Russia's containment of NATO being kind of a driving ambition here, how much do you actually see that as a factor in how Russia negotiates and compromises with Turkey?
I would like to call one of main Russian ideas is to make Turkey additional security belt within NATO. It means, from Russian point of view, that good relations between Russia and Turkey also should influence on certain NATO decisions, certain NATO plan. And, for example, like in case of Hungary, for Russia it's very important if, for example, Hungary and Turkey will block in the future possible membership of Ukraine in NATO, which is a red line for Russia.
Interesting. Samuel, I just want to get your observer thoughts on what you heard from both the Turkish and Russian perspective there.
I think, that's largely the case. Russia certainly does want to have a degree of leverage, or at least an inroad into NATO to restrict major decision-making. I think so far Hungary has probably been more effective than Turkey in some ways in terms of containing and steering and vetoing Russian NATO policy towards Ukraine, but definitely that's a red line. And I would also say that, yes, Turkey has a foreign policy doctrine of strategic autonomy. It wants to engage with a multipolar world order, much like many other regional powers in the Middle East, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. They all have that goal of engaging with the US, Russia, China, different vectors of power. And the Turkey-Russia relationship fits in to that multipolar idea very neatly.
It's incredibly complex, really, all the strains that are at play in negotiating and compromising here. And of course, Murat, I'll come back to you on this one because you alluded to certain meetings that are coming up in the month of October, and we can't underestimate how much the United States factors into the equation right now. The relationship, obviously, with President Biden is much weaker than hoped, but there is still hope that it can be repaired. So how much is really riding now on the planned G20 summit meeting between Erdogan and Biden in Rome, and then possibly in Glasgow as well? Do you think Turkey is actually trying to build some leverage now and was trying to build some leverage at this meeting in Sochi?
I think so, because Turkey is keen to repair relations with the United States, because it's for the Turkish interests to have good relations, especially for the sake of the Middle Eastern population, not only Turkish, but Syrian, Iraqi, or Libyan. The second issue that I want to delineate is about the confusion in the American minds, because the US, for the last 1 decade, did many things wrong. For instance, withdrawal from Afghanistan was an option, but not that much way. But the US lost its leverage in Central Asia. Now, the US is providing support to PKK, PYD in Syria, but for what? What is the ultimate outcome they want to have in Syria through this cooperation? So there must be an understanding of the US policy in the minds of the Americans, that they can negotiate, come to the terms that they can leastly agree with Turks, and start a strategy. But there is no strategy still in the minds of Americans. That's the problem, I believe.
Okay. Andrei, follow up on that. And if you can try and help us understand in the Syrian context how the U.S. interests, Russian interests, and Turkey's interests are all factoring into the equation, especially when it comes to U.S. support for the YPG. Could Moscow help concede to Turkey, at least helping to expel the YPG as a concession of sorts in negotiations with Turkey going forward?
First of all, I would like to agree with my colleague, what he said, that unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends, of course, US has no strategy now for this region, for the Middle East and for the broad Middle East. And this is the weak point of US policy. And from this point of view, United States don't understand now, especially under the Biden administration, what to do in Syria, to stay or to withdraw, what kind of conditions, etc., etc. Of course, in Moscow, we understand some of Turkish concerns. And also we understand that the whole Kurdish question is still very sensitive for all of us. And from this point of view, there might be better understanding between Russia and Turkey. And the problem is that the whole dialogue now with the United States are on a very low level. And this is damaging a lot of things. And we are trying to also to understand what the United States is planning to do in Syria. But frankly speaking, it's still absolutely unclear what they will do in the coming months.
It is unclear. The only thing they have the only thing that has really been manifest in the U.S. strategy is to support the YPG, believing that they're supporting the opposition for Syria in that. It seems to run contrary to their interests in keeping Turkey as a strong NATO ally. But still, you're exactly right. We really don't know what the strategy will be going forward. In the meantime, Samuel, I'm going to come back to you. The whole S-400 issue is still looming over all of this. So what happens then if the U.S. were to dig in its heels even further on the issue and the CAATSA sanctions that they've attached to the S-400 issue, and use, again, the play in Syria as part of lessening or strengthening those sanctions?
So I think that definitely there's a grave risk of those kinds of sanctions being imposed. So when Erdogan hinted a few days ago that he was interested in purchasing new Russian military equipment and that there could be new S-400s, or there's been speculation about Su-class jets even arriving in Turkey, the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee released a tweet basically saying that kinds of sanctions will be imposed on Turkey if any new purchases of Russian technology were to occur. So the U.S. is carving out a pretty strong red line on this. Of course, Turkey has been exempted from the most serious of sanctions from the United States in the past. I can feel reasonably confident that it might be able to do so again. I think that Syria maybe could even be a bargaining chip for Turkey to kind of deal with the United States, particularly because the Biden administration stated very early on in its takeover that it was interested in preventing a major refugee crisis coming out of Idlib and acknowledged Turkey's role in supporting humanitarian operations over there. Maybe Turkey could use the Idlib card and the need to contain Russia as a means of mitigating potential sanctions while it purchases Russian equipment on a transactional level. A bit of warped logic here in some ways, but
Indeed.
it could be their best chance of avoiding sanctions.
But I mean, Samuel, how dedicated do you think the United States really is to continuing to support the YPG in Syria? Will they be willing to actually sacrifice that support for, I bet, and this has been asked for years now, in order to form a better relationship with Turkey and, move further against Russian interests?
Well, the thing is that the Syrian opposition, the Sunni opposition as a movement, has obviously been shrinking in terms of its footholds, right? It's got a strong foothold in Idlib, but there's also Tahrir al-Sham that's in the mix there that complicates things. They have footholds in Daraa, but they don't really form a strong enough or cohesive enough opposition for the United States to find a partner. So the U.S. finds the most convenient partner to be the Kurds and the YPG against a potential resurgence of the Islamic State. That seems to be the prevailing view within the United States. And it's done that at the expense of relations with Turkey. So obviously, if it feels that an ISIS resurgence is not imminent and that their control over their oil reserves is enough, then I think they might be willing to move away from the YPG and re-engage with Turkey. But the existing doctrine in the United States is that that's the case, and Trump's abandonment of the Kurds in October 2019 and during Operation Peace Spring, and all the backlash from Democrats against that has made Biden cautious about doing anything that would resemble Trump with regards to accommodating Turkey, and that means that Biden needs to keep a relationship with the YPG. So domestic politics are at play too in the United States.
Fascinating. Andrei, Turkey has said there's just absolutely no turning back whatsoever on the S-400 deal. That has been extremely important to Russia. That is a very lucrative contract, to say the least, and it does strengthen a bond between Turkey and Russia to share that kind of defense deal. So, I mean, what further cooperation are Turkey and Russia actually exploring now? There have also been proposals we're just hearing about for joint development on platforms for space rocket launches. How far technologically in defense and energy could Turkey and Russia go?
First of all, concerning this issue, I would like to remember the words of one of my friends, one of the aides of previous president, Donald Trump, who said to me once that U.S. can solve issue with Turkey in a very easy way. Turkey should sell to United States this S-400, and it will be over. Conflict will be over. But speaking seriously today, Russia and Turkey could cooperate in the military-industrial complex and a new technological, because it's not too sensitive for Russia. It's quite cooperative, this kind of contacts, etc., etc. Like, for example, Russia is in contacts with Israel on some of the issues concerning new military technologies. I think that this element, though it's not the most expensive thing, can boost some of the contacts between Russia and Turkey, because some technological researches could be beneficial for both sides.
Murat, are you on the same page? And quick final words. We've got about a minute left.
Well, Turkish and Russian cooperation in defense industries is not that much difficult to achieve, because Turkey has a potential, Russia has a great potential, and Turkey needs to import technology. And It's totally dependent on to what extent Russia will deliver not the asset or weapon or any equipment, but technology. If they do it, I think there will be no problem. Turkey will be open to any type of proposal, but not only for Russia, maybe the United States, because Turkey does not confuse the countries in terms of building relations, but focus on the interests, either in defense industries or etc.
Murat Aslan, Andrei Fedorov, Samuel Ramani, thank you all so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. Greatly appreciate it. That is all. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter @the_newsmakers, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.